And joining us right now to talk about what we're seeing so far, Raphael Sonenshein, the executive director of the Pat Brown Institute for Public Affairs at Cal State LA. Thank you for joining us first. I guess this is pretty much expected, but did you expect to see these early numbers be so lopsided?
No. I thought we would know a lot after 9 o'clock by 9:30, but these are surprisingly strong numbers for Gavin Newsom. I thought it would be in the 50s, and I thought it would then get closer. But it may still get somewhat closer, but these are really big numbers.
They are big numbers, but let's talk about it. Okay, so we see that Governor Newsom, he did survive this recall election, but now what is next? You know, he did give his victory speech right now, and he was not boastful. He was humble when he was speaking about it. But what do you think he takes away from this? Because for so long, I feel like so many people were sort of thinking him as possibly future presidential material. Do you think this is curtailing any part of his political ambition?
Well, no. For one thing, surviving a recall is one of the hardest things you can do in politics. And if nothing else, he and his allies and supporters are just going to breathe a sigh of relief. This is not like winning an election. This is winning a recall, which is a near-death experience in politics. A lot of people thought he'd win it very narrowly. He's winning it very big, which actually sets him up for re-election next year, running for governor in the regular election. Where he goes from there, I don't know. But he is clearly much more viable coming out of this than we might have thought 3 weeks ago, when it looked like the race was almost a dead heat with likely voters.
You wonder what kind of person would want to challenge a governor who just won a recall election by, you'd figure, more than 60% 9 months a year earlier. This is going to be an interesting sight to see how this plays out, whether the governor has to just continue on his campaigning as he's done for the last, he said, 9 months, or whether this pretty much opens the door for a cakewalk in 2022. Because honestly, unless something happens over the next year, who's going to want to challenge him?
1 year is a lifetime in politics. 6 months is a lifetime in politics. Things can change. He can end up in the same tough spot going in. A lot of people will want to run for that office. I think Larry Elder is going to want to run for that office. I think that would be probably welcomed by the Newsom campaign, but he seems to be the leader among Republicans right now. A lot can change in a year. We've seen how it's changed. He was elected with a huge majority when he first ran in 2018. So the hardest thing to do is to know what adjustments you have to make when you've won a big victory. It's easier when you've had a real close call, and then you look at everything, and they may have to, in some ways, make sure they're in the right place policy-wise, which they seem to be in right now, and stay there and get better where they need to, and see where they can get even better politically, although they did really pull off a phenomenal example of generating party unity in a party that was mostly asleep about 3 weeks ago. Democrats, a lot of them didn't even know there was an election. And by election day, they were just roaring. And I give the Newsom campaign a lot of credit for that.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about, again, do you think that Governor Gavin Newsom is now going to address some of the people who were trying to recall him? Is he going to try to bring a few people together more? Is he going to try to, I mean, this did come. They certainly received a whole lot of signatures on the measure to recall him, as well as, it was extended because of the pandemic, which probably gave him some extra time to be able to gather more votes. But what's next for Governor Newsom that he tries to, he's saying that it's divisive right now. We need to come together. Do you think that what can he do to get people to come back together?
Well, I'm not sure when you've won a staggering electoral victory that it is your job to make everybody who didn't vote for you feel better about you. I think you can reach out to voters. I think at the activist level, people are pretty dug in. And I think if he sets himself a goal to get everybody to be happy with him, to go for unanimous support, he's just going to be frustrated. I do think there's a lot of people on the fence who can be brought around, but I'd also call attention to the fact that there's a lot of voters, even in his own camp, who didn't show up for this race. And if he gets them to come around, then that's just as valuable as getting somebody on the other side. But I think what you look for is the inactive people who are open to an argument and a discussion, and you try to reach out. But of course you reach out to everybody, but don't set yourself the goal that you have to be loved by everybody.
Yeah, speaking of which, this was looked at as a shot for Republicans to take over the biggest office in the state when they might not have had a chance to do it in an off-year, one of the mid-year gubernatorial elections. So what does this say about the state of being a Republican statewide office holder in the state of California?
Well, there are no statewide office holders who are Republican right now. And one problem they have now is, in a sense, it feels like they can't win without Trump and they can't win with Trump. They kind of can't find a happy spot where they get what Trump brings their party without generating a furious counter response from Democrats. And they have an additional problem. Because the president was down on mail-in voting, and even down on election integrity, a lot of Republicans didn't take advantage of this phenomenal vote by mail system, which is the greatest thing since sliced bread for voter convenience, and then restricted themselves to trying to vote on the day of the election. How many people won't do that because they have been told the election is rigged? So they've got to somehow figure out where they want to go going forward. Will there be the party of Trump, or will there be a different kind of party? And I don't think they're in a position to grapple with that yet. I think that is a bigger problem for them than Gavin Newsom right now.
Yeah, Rafe, you just touched on it for a moment there. You know, Larry Elder was sort of already trying to bring up fraud. Governor Newsom was shutting that down right away, wasn't even going to address that part of it. Do you think Larry Elder's camp is now going to just say, you know what, we cannot really cry foul now by looking at the massive amount of people who threw their support behind Governor Newsom? Or do you think they are going to try that? Do you think they're going to try to still start waving that voter fraud flag around?
I can't predict, but I would say just because there was a large landslide against the recall, that will not stop people who want to claim fraud. It didn't stop Donald Trump, that he lost by millions of votes in a not very close election. The fact of the matter is, this is a kind of article of faith now that's being, I think, spread around the Republican Party. I think it's not good for their voter participation going forward. And I think a lot of Republican leaders are worried that they have an activated Republican base, but that base is not sure that their votes will be counted and may not participate. That's a big, big problem. But I think now it's an article of faith that when the election doesn't go the way you want it to go, and in fact, Larry Elder was announcing it was fraudulent before the polls had even closed. So I think it's inevitable that it will continue.
Yeah, someone jumped the gun last night on one of his websites for claiming fraud. Real quick, do you think we'll ever see another recall election in California? I know some of the state legislators have promised they're going to make an announcement tomorrow on reforming the recall process here in California, maybe make it more difficult to make this happen again. Was this the last one, or do you think we'll see more in the future?
The recall is going nowhere. It's one of the most popular things in California, but it has to be fixed. We dodged a bullet here, not about partisanship, but about the fact that the replacement election could generate a governor who has far less support than the governor who would have been recalled. That's just got to be fixed. And I'm very heartened that people are talking about finding long-term solutions, not just to get partisan advantage for one party or the other, but let's have a good recall that really causes the voters' voices to be heard effectively. And if they want someone out, they should be able to get them out, but they should be able to replace them with somebody who they want to have in with the same majority sentiment.
All right. Thank you very much, Raphael Sonenshein with the Pat Brown Institute. We appreciate your insight in this, and thank you for all your information.
My pleasure.
He's always great to speak with, always on election nights as well.